It was supposed to be just another quiet morning. The kids were still asleep upstairs. The sun hadn't fully climbed over the rooftops in Greater Manchester. And inside a modest home, nothing looked out of place, until police walked through the door. Lying motionless in the living room was 43-year-old Tamara Padi, a woman who had built a life from scratch, raised children with care, and once believed in second chances. Less than an hour earlier, she'd been alive. Standing nearby was her husband, still in his uniform. When asked what happened, he didn't stammer. He didn't panic. He looked at them and said, "She deserved it." No struggle, no remorse, just those 3 words. Tamara had left behind everything she knew in South Africa to find stability, freedom, and peace in the UK. But what she found behind closed doors was something else entirely. This wasn't a crime of impulse. It wasn't rage in the heat of the moment. He had time. Hours, in fact. Time to stop. Time to think. Time to choose something else. And he didn't. She was a mother, a businesswoman, a friend, and she died while her children slept just steps away. But why? What could push someone to wait in silence, then take the life of a woman he once loved? And why did he believe she deserved to die? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if someone you trusted became the person you feared most? And if you're watching from outside the UK, tell us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. The rest of this story will leave you speechless. Before her name appeared in headlines, before her life became the subject of court transcripts and whispered conversations, Tamara Padi was simply a woman trying to live well, love fully, and raise her children in peace. Born and raised in South Africa, Tamara was known for her strength and her quiet determination. Friends described her as ambitious, grounded, and deeply resilient, someone who didn't just dream of a better life, but actively built it with both hands. She grew up understanding the value of hard work, and she carried that ethic with her through every chapter of her life. Tamara didn't come from wealth or comfort, but she had a vision for what her future could look like. And when the time came, she was brave enough to leave the familiar behind. Her decision to relocate to the United Kingdom was not impulsive, it was intentional. A leap of faith. Like many others, she sought better opportunities, for herself, and more importantly for her children. She wanted them to grow up in a place where safety wasn't a luxury, where success didn't feel out of reach. She left behind a home, a culture, and a family that loved her. But she carried with her a hope that the sacrifice would be worth it. Once in the UK, Tamara's natural drive didn't falter. She poured herself into building something solid, not just financially, but personally. She became a businesswoman, a provider, a figure in her community who quietly earned respect. Her business wasn't just a means of income, it was a symbol of independence. She was the kind of person who others came to for advice, support, or encouragement, the kind who celebrated others' wins as if they were her own. But more than any job or role she took on, motherhood was the identity she cherished most. Her children were at the center of her world. Every long day, every tough decision, every new beginning was for them. She wasn't just raising them, she was protecting them, guiding them, and showing them through her own life what courage looked like. Tamara wasn't loud about her struggles. She carried pain privately, with the same grace she brought to everything else. And perhaps that's why no one saw the danger coming. She met her husband during what many believed was a hopeful time. He served in the Royal Navy and appeared from the outside to be stable and disciplined. To those around them, the relationship may have looked solid, a partnership between 2 strong individuals, each with their own story of resilience. But inside the walls of their home, the cracks began to show. The love that once held them together began to fade, replaced by silence, distance, and tension that refused to break. Tamara didn't broadcast her personal life. She handled things quietly, focusing on her children and her work. But over time, close friends noticed the change. There was a heaviness in her voice, a fatigue that went beyond being a working mother. She stayed, perhaps out of hope, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of a desire to keep the family intact for her kids. Whatever her reasons, Tamara faced those days with the same quiet strength she always had. What she couldn't have known, what no one could have predicted, was how that silence would end. Not with words, not with a fight, but with the final act of a man who once stood beside her and then decided she no longer deserved to live. She had built a life for others, and in return, her own was stolen. And now the question remains, why? At first glance, Tamara Padi's life appeared whole. From the outside, she was the image of success, a thriving entrepreneur, a proud mother of two, and a woman who had taken bold steps to create stability after emigrating from South Africa. But behind closed doors, her reality was much harder to see, because Tamara had become an expert at hiding it. Her marriage to Aubrey Pule Padi had started, like many do, with love and optimism. Aubrey, a man from South Africa, seemed devoted and reliable when they first met. Together, they co-founded a care business in the UK, reflecting their shared commitment to building a future. They had big dreams, dreams that Tamara believed would come true. She believed in second chances and in the power of shared goals and mutual respect. Aubrey was someone she thought she could build a future with, especially in a new country, where family could be the only familiar thing left. But as the months turned into years, the man she married began to change. Or perhaps, the mask he wore began to slip. Aubrey's behavior grew rigid, less like a partner and more like an overseer. What had once seemed like protectiveness hardened into control. He needed to know where she was, who she spoke to, and how she spent her time. There wasn't always shouting. There didn't need to be. His dominance came through in silence, in moods that held the entire household hostage, in a tone that made Tamara shrink even when no insults were spoken. He policed her movements, not overtly, but effectively. Friends and neighbors later described how Tamara seemed different when Aubrey was around. Reserved, watchful, she was the same woman, but dimmed, less vibrant. Her smile, though present, was slower to arrive. There's no public record of physical abuse, but psychological torment doesn't leave bruises. It leaves hesitation. It leaves a woman second-guessing herself in the mirror. It shows up in quiet choices. The phone call never made, the invitation politely declined, the secret kept for the sake of peace. Tamara didn't speak openly about her suffering, but those close to her began to notice small signs. A friend might receive a call late at night, Tamara's voice barely above a whisper. She just sounded tired, one friend recalled. Not just physically, emotionally drained. Sometimes she would cancel plans at the last minute. Sometimes she seemed anxious when a conversation lingered too long on personal matters. Sometimes she simply avoided talking about Aubrey altogether. Yet despite the growing emotional strain, Tamara didn't walk away. Whether it was hope that things would improve, fear of what leaving might mean, or a deep desire to keep her family intact, she stayed. She stayed for her children, who were her world. She stayed because, like so many women, she carried the impossible weight of trying to be everything to everyone while holding herself together. Her home became a stage where two realities played out. By day, she ran her business, helped with homework, and smiled through small talk at the school gates. She was known and respected in her community. She volunteered. She supported others. But by night, the warmth faded. The walls echoed with tension. Aubrey's presence was a shadow she couldn't escape. There was no public scene, no single moment that sounded alarm bells loud enough to shake people awake. But abuse doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it moves quietly, eroding confidence, smothering joy, and isolating its victim without anyone noticing, until it's too late. And Tamara, proud and private, bore it alone. Still, she tried to carve out moments of strength. She took her children out, helped them with school, made birthdays feel special. Even as her spirit began to strain under the weight of her marriage, she refused to let it define her completely. She was more than the pain she endured, but pain can't be buried forever. And behind the facade of a successful woman lay the deep emotional scars of someone slowly being cornered. Friends now wonder whether Tamara knew what was coming, whether in the final days before her murder, she sensed that something was about to snap. Whether she looked into her husband's eyes and saw not the man she married, but the man who had made her home feel like a cage. Tamara never got the chance to escape it. But the cracks were always there. The question is, why didn't more people see them? July 7th, 2021. It was supposed to be just another quiet night. A mother returning home from a long shift, a family winding down after another day. But inside the house on Akersfield Close in Stallabridge, Greater Manchester, a storm was brewing. A storm that had been building for months, and now it was about to unleash its fury. Aubrey Pule Padi had made up his mind. The events leading up to that fateful night had been clouded with tension, escalating violence and fear. For months, Tamara Padi had lived under a shadow she couldn't escape. She had confided in friends, describing her estranged husband as controlling, creepy, and dangerous. But nothing could prepare her for the nightmare that was about to unfold. It was after a late-night care visit that Tamara returned home that evening. The time was nearing midnight. She was tired but relieved to be back with her two daughters, Tia and Mia, who were asleep upstairs. Unbeknownst to her, Aubrey had already made his way into the house. For hours, Aubrey had been waiting. He wasn't distracted, he wasn't asleep. He had let himself in earlier, armed with knives, a hammer, gloves, and even a length of cord, and he was prepared to kill. What's even more chilling is that Aubrey didn't act in the heat of the moment. He waited. He lingered in the background, setting his alarm for 3:30 a.m., giving Tamara time to fall asleep. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime planned and executed with cold, calculating intent. Tamara's colleague, who had been staying over, went to bed that night, unaware of the danger lurking just a few feet away. As the clock struck 3:30 a.m., Aubrey knew it was time. He approached Tamara's bedroom while she slept. Armed with a metal exercise bar, he struck her with brutal force. What happened next would haunt everyone who learned about it. Aubrey believed Tamara was dead after the initial blow. But as he heard movement, a faint noise from the room, he realized she was still alive. In a final, terrifying act of certainty, Aubrey returned to Tamara's bedside. He then grabbed a knife and stabbed her 8 times, ensuring that there would be no chance of survival. The most horrifying part? Tamara's 2 daughters were just down the hall. In a neighboring room, they were asleep, oblivious to the violence unfolding only feet away. After the attack, Aubrey didn't flee. He didn't try to hide the horrific act he had just committed. Instead, he called emergency services, telling the operator that he had killed his wife and, chillingly, that she deserved it. When police arrived on the scene, they found Tamara's lifeless body in the bedroom, blood pooling around her. Her children, still in shock, were taken into care. The family's once safe home was now a crime scene, and the community would never be the same again. Neighbors who had known Tamara for years were in disbelief. No one could understand how such a thing could happen to someone so vibrant, so caring, and so committed to her family. I just saw all the police and ambulances and thought, what on earth could have happened? She was always so full of life. You never think something like this would happen to someone like her. Another neighbor echoed that sentiment. She was one of the kindest people I knew. She didn't deserve this. But it did happen, and it was no accident. It was deliberate. Aubrey's actions were planned meticulously over hours, and he carried them out with horrifying precision. When the police arrived and arrested Aubrey, they were left stunned by his cold demeanor. He showed no remorse, no guilt, only a disturbing sense of justification. She deserved it, he repeated, over and over like a mantra. Tamara's life had been full of dreams of providing a better future for her daughters, dreams of success, and a future free from abuse. But in the blink of an eye, all of that was destroyed. What once was a loving home had been reduced to a place of unimaginable horror, and Tamara, the woman who had fought so hard for her family, was gone in an instant. Her children's lives would never be the same. Her community would never be the same. And as her loved ones mourned her death, one question remained unanswered. How long had Tamara been living in fear before the inevitable struck? When the emergency call came in just after 12 a.m., it wasn't made by a terrified neighbor or a distressed witness. It was Aubrey Pule Padi, the killer himself, who dialed for help. Yet there was no panic in his voice, no urgency, no sign of remorse. Aubrey calmly told the operator that his wife, Tamara, was dead. But when officers arrived at the scene, they weren't met with the usual chaos after a violent domestic incident. There was no frenzied shouting, no attempts to resuscitate her, and no sign of a struggle. Aubrey was there, eerily composed. Blood stained his hands, and the life of a woman who had once been his partner in everything had been brutally taken. Yet what he said to police chilled the air more than the scene itself. She deserved it. Those words, cold, unapologetic, and devoid of any remorse, were Aubrey's exact statement. No hesitation, no regret, just a stark, calm declaration that what he had done was not only justified, but somehow warranted. In that moment, it became evident that this was not a crime born of madness or an uncontrolled outburst of passion. This was something much darker. A man who, with chilling clarity, had made the decision that his wife no longer had the right to live. Police officers later described his demeanor as disturbingly flat. There were no shaking hands, no visible signs of distress. He appeared almost indifferent to the gravity of his actions. He acted as if he had done nothing wrong, and in his mind had delivered some form of justice.
Called me. I think it was 5 minutes after 12. I could not make up what she was saying. She kept on saying, "Akona, Tamara." She minced her words. I wasn't sure what's happening because I was with my sister when Tamara called 2 days before. Because I was also confused, I called Tamara, if only I can ring. Because when I call her, I always use WhatsApp. Whether the phone is on or off, sometimes WhatsApp would ring. I just thought, what is Lulama talking about? Because Tamara's phone is ringing. I called Akona, who was standing here. Akona was my maid of honor, by the way, in my wedding. Akona, I just got a call from Olulama. I'm not sure what she's going on about, what is happening. And Akona said, Sam, it's true. And they're like, what is true? She also minced her words and said there's an article. She got a call from Omili, she's not sure. As a person who's lived in the UK, I know exactly what to do. I just went on Google and I tapped Tamara Padi. She was already trending on the headlines. They've shown her car, I knew her car, and I knew Akona was referring to.
But what could possibly have driven him to this point? Why would a man once loved and trusted by Tamara believe she deserved to die? Tamara and Aubrey's marriage had deteriorated over the years. Once a close-knit partnership built on shared dreams of a better life, it had soured, especially in the months before the murder. Tamara, despite all the challenges she faced, was thriving. She had left her home country of South Africa with her 2 daughters in search of better opportunities in the UK. In the process, she had built a successful career, supported her family, and was respected in the community. Aubrey, on the other hand, was struggling. His behavior had become more possessive and controlling. He saw Tamara's growing independence as a threat to his authority and control over their relationship. His jealousy was consuming, and her success without him felt like a betrayal. For Aubrey, this loss of power was intolerable. In the days leading up to the murder, tensions between them had escalated. On the day before her death, Aubrey had assaulted Tamara, punching her in the face after she refused to let him use her phone. Yet, Tamara, ever resilient, refused to let him break her. She stayed strong for her children. She continued with her life. But Aubrey saw this strength as defiance. At the police station, Aubrey showed no sign of remorse during the initial stages of his arrest and interrogation. Officers noted that he spoke in a calm, almost detached manner, offering clear but brief responses. He didn't break down emotionally. He didn't immediately request a lawyer. In fact, he didn't even ask about his children. What Aubrey did do, however, was double down on his statement. She deserved it. That chilling phrase, delivered with no emotion, no sorrow, would become the defining moment of the entire case. It wasn't just a confession. It was a statement of belief. Aubrey was convinced that he was justified in taking Tamara's life. His anger, jealousy, and deep-seated need for control had twisted his perception of reality. For the police, this was a sobering realization. This was no crime of passion. This was the act of a man who had meticulously planned his actions. A man who had waited, prepared, and then struck, believing in his warped mind that he had delivered justice. But for everyone who knew Tamara, there was no justification. Only grief, heartache, and unanswered questions. In a matter of hours, Aubrey didn't just take a life. He destroyed a family, traumatized his children, and robbed the world of a woman who had only ever strived to do right by those around her. His words still linger in the air, echoing through the case. She deserved it. 3 words that revealed a twisted worldview and forever changed the lives of everyone who loved Tamara. From the moment Aubrey Pule Padi was taken into custody, the Crown Prosecution Service moved quickly. The evidence was undeniable. Tamara Padi's lifeless body in the home they once shared, injuries that told the story of a brutal, prolonged attack, and most damning of all, his own words. She deserved it. That chilling phrase followed him into the courtroom months later, during one of the most harrowing trials heard in Manchester that year. Aubrey was charged with murder. He pleaded guilty. There would be no trial to contest the facts, no attempt to mask what had taken place. But what unfolded in the courtroom was still agonizing, an exercise in facing the full weight of the horror he had unleashed. The prosecution laid out the timeline with devastating clarity. They detailed how Aubrey had entered Tamara's house with weapons in hand, knives, a hammer, gloves, and a length of cord. How he had set an alarm for 3:30 a.m., not out of habit or chance, but with intent. Intent to wait until she was most vulnerable. They revealed that he had hidden inside her home while she and a colleague returned late from work, and how, while their daughters slept just feet away, he attacked her with a metal exercise bar. Believing she was dead, he walked out of the room, only to return moments later and stab her 8 more times when he heard her move. The courtroom listened in silence as the medical examiner described each injury in detail. Tamara's sister and other relatives sat in disbelief. Her family back in South Africa received updates through phone calls and online links, trying to comprehend from a distance what no parent, sibling, or friend should ever have to hear. There was no defense strategy, no pleas for leniency, just a guilty man standing before the court, mostly silent. The presiding judge did not mince words. He described the act as a cruel and calculated killing, one that showed forethought and malice, not spontaneity. What made it even more appalling, the judge noted, was the presence of Tamara's 2 young daughters in the house. That Aubrey had not just murdered their mother, but had done so while they slept nearby. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years before he could even be considered for parole. There was no visible emotion on Aubrey's face as the sentence was read. He stood motionless, showing no remorse. Outside the courtroom, Tamara's family issued a short but powerful statement. Tamara was everything to her girls. A daughter, a sister, a mother. She deserved love and peace, not pain, and she most certainly did not deserve this. The case struck a chord far beyond Greater Manchester. News outlets across both the UK and South Africa covered the story. On social media, her name trended for days. Women, especially immigrant women, shared their own stories of hidden abuse, isolation, and fear. Tamara's story became part of a wider conversation about domestic violence, about safety nets that fail, and about the hidden lives of women who appear strong and successful on the outside, while silently enduring terror behind closed doors. Her legacy was not defined by how she died, but by how she lived. A woman who left her home country to build something better. A mother who worked through nights to provide for her daughters. A friend remembered for her laughter and resilience. And a victim who never should have become one. Do you think justice was truly served in this case? Comment below. We read every single one. The murder of Tamara Padi sent a wave of heartbreak through 2 continents, shattering the lives of her daughters, breaking her family in South Africa, and stunning the community she had worked so hard to build in the UK. The violence of her death left a wound that time alone could never heal. Her daughters, Tia and Mia, were asleep just feet away when their mother was attacked and killed in the early hours of the morning. At an age when a mother's presence is everything, they awoke to a world changed forever. Tamara had been their protector, their constant. She lived for them. She worked long hours in the care sector, often overnight, just to make sure they were safe and secure. But that night, while they slept, the one person who should have never hurt her became the reason they'd never see their mother alive again. The trauma of losing a parent is devastating in any context, but losing her in such a violent and personal way at the hands of their own father left them in an unimaginable position. Their futures are now marked by grief and the cruel memory of what happened in the home that once promised safety. Back in South Africa, Tamara's family was crushed by the news. Thousands of miles away in Khayelitsha, they mourned not just the loss of a daughter and sister, but a woman who had once walked their streets with dreams too big for her surroundings. They had watched her rise, seen her cross oceans to build something better for herself and her children. To hear that her life ended this way, ambushed in her own home, was like being dropped into a nightmare they couldn't wake from. The UK community, too, was left shaken. Friends and neighbors who had known Tamara as strong, spirited, and compassionate were stunned. Many hadn't known the full extent of what she had endured in her private life. In the aftermath, vigils were held in her memory. People gathered to light candles, share memories, and speak her name with love. Fundraisers were launched to support her daughters and ensure that Tamara's legacy would never be forgotten. She wasn't just a victim. She was a fighter, a provider, a mother, a woman who gave everything she had to give. And now, in death, she has become a symbol of resilience and a painful reminder of the dangers that can hide behind closed doors. Tamara Padi's story is more than just a crime. It's a mirror held up to a much larger problem hiding in plain sight. It forces us to confront how domestic violence can exist behind even the most polished appearances. How a woman can be successful, admired, hardworking, and still live in fear inside her own home. Too often, we associate abuse with chaos, with financial hardship, with obvious warning signs. But Tamara's life didn't fit that narrative. She co-owned a business. She was a pillar in her community. Her children were well cared for. On the outside, things looked functional, even admirable. But within her marriage, control, emotional abuse, and intimidation slowly tightened their grip. And by the time the violence became physical, the cracks had already widened into fractures. That's what makes this so important to talk about. Abuse doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through isolation, manipulation, and control. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who know how to hide in plain sight, who wear uniforms, carry status, and know exactly how to avoid suspicion. Tamara had reached out. She had shared concerns with friends. She had described her estranged husband's behavior as creepy. She had already separated from him. She had tried to reclaim her peace. But even with that distance, she wasn't safe. That's the devastating truth for many survivors. Leaving doesn't always mean the danger ends. This case underscores the urgent need for early intervention, not just from law enforcement, but from communities, families, and friends. When someone confides in you, take it seriously. Listen. Ask questions. Stay close. Your support might be the only lifeline they have. It's also a reminder for all of us to check in, not just when things look bad, but especially when they don't. High-functioning individuals like Tamara often carry the weight of their pain in silence. They feel the pressure to appear fine, to protect their children, their work, their dignity. But no one should carry that alone. Tamara's life should never have ended this way. But in sharing her story, we hope to create awareness, to spark conversations, and to remind those suffering that they're not invisible and they're never alone. If you or someone you know is in a situation that doesn't feel safe, don't wait. Reach out. And if this story moved you, share it, subscribe, and help keep Tamara's voice alive. She deserved it. 3 words: cold, deliberate. Delivered without hesitation by a man who once vowed to protect her. A man she had trusted, shared a home with, raised children beside. A man who watched her sleep, then slaughtered her while their daughters lay just 1 room away. Tamara Padi crossed oceans for a better life. She left her home in South Africa to build something lasting in the UK. Safety, opportunity, a future for her children. And yet, after all the sacrifices, she wasn't killed by a stranger in a dark alley. She was killed in her own home by someone who once claimed to love her. This wasn't just murder, it was betrayal. And it forces us to ask the question, how many more Tamaras will there be before we start listening? Not just to the loud cries for help, but the quiet ones. The subtle signs, the brave confessions made in whispers. Because Tamara tried to speak, she tried to escape, and still, she died. If Tamara's story moved you, share this video to help raise awareness. Subscribe for more real-life crime stories that deserve to be told and never forgotten.